Please welcome Gary May, Chancellor, University of California, Davis. Heidi Anderson, President, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. Nancy Cantor, President, Rutgers University, Newark. Tim White, Chancellor, California State University System. And Wendy Winterstein, President, Iowa State University.
Thank you. Is my microphone on? Thank you. It's an honor to be here. A wonderful opening session here for APLU. As I walked into the meeting hall, I heard the dulcet tones of Lionel Richie and the Commodores, and I felt right at home. Wasn't sure I was in the right place, but I felt right at home. Good evening. It's my privilege to moderate today's keynote panel with my esteemed peers. We'll be discussing several different topics related to this year's conference theme, which is in service. As public universities, our teaching and research are grounded in fulfilling a service mission, or as I like to say, using our powers for good. Serving students is at the core of our mission, but more than ever, universities are also called upon to serve our communities, our nation, and the world. This is especially true in the research enterprise. Armed with new knowledge, innovations, and scientific discoveries, we're extending the benefits of our research activities across the globe. For example, at UC Davis, we're identifying new techniques that may help rehabilitate coral reefs. We're working with farmers around the world to adapt to climate change and drought, and the list goes on. As universities with a service mission, we have an important role to play in addressing world problems. The work we do to benefit other countries often boosts the well-being of our own country, our state, or our region. Many of our greatest challenges are, in fact, global in nature. The environment and global warming, food production and natural resource depletion, healthcare and the threat of pandemics. These are immense, complex challenges. No one institution can solve them alone. We must collaborate with each other, with our communities, with industry, with government leaders, and others. Increasingly, our solutions must rely on enhanced collaboration and communication between researchers, key decision makers, and the broader public. Finally, we must continue to nurture an environment on our campuses that is conducive to discovery and innovation. That means providing venues for students and communities to freely hear, express, and debate different points of view. In today's polarizing times, this is often easier said than done. Our campuses are grappling with free speech controversies and incidents that can provoke or inflame us. Yet college campuses have always been, and should continue to be, a forum for wide open debate and discussion. With that, let's get this conversation going. I have some questions that I've prepared for our panelists. I'm going to start with Heidi, sitting to my right. Heidi, 1890 institutions like yours were founded to serve African American students, their communities, and others. How are these universities and HBCUs adapting to new challenges, including funding challenges, as they strive to serve a broader population?
Well, Dr. May, is my microphone on? Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for the question, and I'd like to also thank Peter for cajoling me to be here on this stage as well.
That's right.
As someone already said, you can't say no to Peter. Let me start by saying, first of all, being a proud president at an 1890 institution, the 1890 institutions have continued and still remains today with focusing on our mission. Our mission began in 1890 by the Second Morrill Act to actually give an education and also to graduate the number of African American students in this country. And we are very proud to be continuing to do that particular mission today. Over the years, however, 1890s have evolved, and we've evolved and risen to the challenge to graduate a broader population and to remain dedicated to our founding mission. And as such, many of our universities in 1890s, we have a larger and a more diverse demographic of institutions. My institution, of which I serve as the 16th president of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, I am very proud to say that we still have a diverse student body, and we're second to having a diverse faculty in the country. We're very pleased with that. In the system, in our University of Maryland system, we actually also have the highest 6-year graduation rate among the 4 Black colleges in the Maryland state. And we're very proud to be the most diverse institution of our system institutions. The other factor of 1890s is that all of our 1890 institutions conduct world-class research. And this research is done with making sure that we have students who are at the undergraduate level as well as the graduate level partner and work with the talented faculty that we have in all of our institutions. And what those students learn before they graduate is how to do cutting-edge research that is really focused and serves the communities in which they will be going back to. These students also, like many of our land-grant institutions, they leave us when they graduate with published research that we can be very, very proud of. And I'm happy to say in our particular institution at UMES, we are one of the largest producers of African-American graduates in marine sciences. We also graduate a number of African-American students in a number of other disciplines like physical therapy, pharmacy, also aviation sciences. We're proud to be the only bachelor's aviation science degree program in the state of Maryland. But like many of the other 1890s, at Xavier University, graduating more African-American students in pharmacy than in the country. Howard University, graduating more African-American medical doctors in the country. The second challenge that I wanted to talk about today from an 1890s perspective is all of us are looking at how do we look at the challenge of broadening our research as well as our extension while remaining relevant to the 21st century needs. And at UMES, I'm also proud to say that in the state of Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, we are the only doctoral research program on the shore. And what that means is I have nine counties on the shore, and in addition to that, we border the state of Delaware as well as the state of Virginia. So what we try to do from a research perspective is look at not just the communities of those 9 counties, but look at the communities of what we call the Delmarva region. That's Delaware, Virginia, and Maryland. I'm very proud of our talented faculty who are in all of our schools, but I really want to give you a couple of examples. In our School of Agriculture and Natural Sciences, our faculty work in a number of research themes. And one particular theme I want to share with you today is in food safety. And I'm sure this speaks the same as many of our land-grant institutions, but I'm the president of UMES, and I want to tell you about my place. And also, I had to be up here. So, telling you a little bit about our food science, our faculty in the School of Agriculture and Technology created a Center for Food Science and Safety. And what that center works to do is really look at what are the problems in our community and how we can engage our community partners. The food science in poultry, in seafood, in marine-based area, and also in agriculture. And one example I'd like to share with you today before my time runs out is one of our faculty members, very proud of him, Dr. Simon Zibolo. Dr. Simon has actually worked with our farmers, and with the local farmers in the region, as I mentioned, but he also has a small little area right there on the campus. And what he's working on doing is trying to solve the problem of pest management. As we all know, when you look at crops, you have pest insects are going to come in and try to harm the particular crop. So what he's using is a new approach to try to get a more organically based insect pest management system. He did this with watermelons, and the reason I share this is because I had an opportunity to actually partake of the fruit of his labor, so to say. What Dr. Simon did was he took squash and he did what's called trap cropping. But he shared this particular type of research with our local farmers. And he put the squash all around the field of the watermelons. And actually, the beetle, the cat that attacks watermelons, attacked the squash instead. So this trap cropping approach really helped bring a larger yield of the watermelon in. And not only was the yield larger, let me tell you guys, those things were this huge. My husband and I had a chance to get 2 of them, and they were really quite tasty. But that's not why I'm up here to tell you this today, but, well, he also does edible insects, and I've eaten those as well. But finally, what I really want to say to you is the 1890s, we stand as land-grant institutions, remain committed to our mission, and as I said earlier, we're doing world-class research. Finally, I would like to just say, the other area that most of our 1890s are working on is many of us get research through the USDA, through FDA, through NOAA, and many others. But one of the things we continue to make sure we do is focus on our local communities, stay engaged, and how do we form those partnerships and continue to make those particular relationships viable for those communities we serve.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Nancy Cantor, universities, certainly urban universities like yours, are called to serve students and also the broader community. You've had many demands: the community, economic development, access, and degree completion, and many more. How do universities balance or perhaps integrate all of these needs and demands? Maybe you could give us some examples of what you're doing.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Peter, for having me up here. I want to jump off Heidi's last point about the role in local communities. And I want to make the point in general that, first of all, we often, as educational institutions, as research universities, think of local as somewhat parochial. And I want to argue that local resonates globally, especially at this moment in our world. And so I want to make the point that most urban research universities can be both engines of social mobility and anchor institutions, making a huge difference in the economic development and opportunity structure of our cities. So many cities around this country have the legacy of the architecture of segregation, which has really created huge disparities, as we all know, in both educational opportunity and economic opportunity. And so I want to argue that we can indeed integrate it, because these are really two sides of one coin. And that if we collaborate both within the higher education sector, and as importantly, across the kinds of anchor institutions, corporate, cultural, eds and meds that are in urban centers and in rural communities, we can create the kind of both educational opportunity and economic development that really changes that landscape for good. In Newark, New Jersey, for example, collaboration is absolutely the name of the game. We have billions of dollars of investment in Newark right now, and we do not want to be the next Brooklyn. Our mayor says that all the time. What do I mean by that? We don't want residents of Newark who have migrated and immigrated to Newark over generations to find opportunity suddenly to be displaced by the billions of dollars of investment. How can a higher education institution, an urban research institution, be an engine in making sure that there's equitable growth? Well, for example, the mayor came to us and said, do you have anybody who can figure out how much risk there is and in which neighborhoods there's risk for displacement from the billions of dollars that have been invested? So one of our best civil rights lawyers came up with a displacement risk index matrix that is now the basis for an equitable growth commission in Newark. So on the one hand, we can be engines with our research opportunities. We can be engines of equitable growth. On the other hand, we have to change as institutions ourselves. So Rutgers Newark and NJIT and other major institutions in Newark have really banded together in the Newark City of Learning Collaborative to increase the post-secondary attainment rate of residents of Newark. So on the one hand, you want to figure out the landscape of economic development, entrepreneurship, hire local, buy local, live local. And on the other hand, we need to be educating the very students who are growing up in the families that you don't want displaced in a city like Newark. So at Rutgers Newark, for example, over the last 5 years, we've literally increased from 7% of our undergraduate population coming from Newark to 14.5% of our undergraduate population. Thousands of Newark residents are getting an opportunity to come to Rutgers Newark because we have what we call Run to the Top. So any resident of Newark or any New Jersey County College, community college graduate who transfers to Rutgers Newark, and that's where the vast majority, for example, of our immigrant first-generation population will have their first taste of higher ed in a community college. Any either Newark resident or community college resident with an adjusted family income of $60,000 or below has a full last-in tuition scholarship at Rutgers Newark. and NJIT is doing similar work. That kind of thing opens the barriers of opportunity, and then those students become the change agents within the communities, both within their families and within the communities. So in our honors living learning community that is dedicated to local citizenship in a global world, 60% of the students are from Newark. 80% of them are students of color, 76% are Pell eligible. These students are going to become the agents of change who, when the companies in Newark provide opportunities for local hiring and local sourcing and procurement and local entrepreneurship, these are the students that are going to go right in to those C-suites and make a big difference in our local community. So I want to argue really that the distinction that is often made between caring about access and opportunity and degree completion and caring about anchor institution, equitable growth, economic development, high-impact research, that's a false distinction. And I think the Moral Act, of course, which we all go back to, is a perfect example of where there is no distinction there. That was an act that both committed land-grant institutions to educating the local community and committed them to the high-end research and high-impact research that would make a difference in the economic outlook of those communities. In all the cities across this country, that is what has to happen with higher education. The final thing I would say on that is that we can't do it narrowly, and we can't do it without collaborating. So we need the pathways from community colleges to four-year institutions. We need our collaborations with our corporate partners. In Newark, New Jersey, Prudential has been around for 150 years and has stuck it out. Audible has come, Panasonic has come, Mars is now moving in. All of them come knowing that either we will be on their tail or the mayor will be on their tail to really collaborate with us and commit to the growth of the city of Newark. And then the final thing I will say is that you can't do any of this without the civic democracy that is built. Often the best platform for that are the arts and cultural voices that give real voice to those who've been marginalized on the sidelines of opportunity. And so for us, the thing we're probably most proud of is our University Community Arts Collaboratory in a building in downtown Newark that was empty for 30 years, now has a Whole Foods and apartments and Marcus BP, but it also has community artists and university artists, and together they are telling the stories of the newest Americans who we are protecting in our sanctuary city of Newark. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Nancy, for those insights. In contrast to an urban university, universities in more rural settings, like Iowa State, Wendy, often serve as anchors for their entire state or region. Tell us a little bit about ensuring how their work impacts the regions, including your own work with rural students. What's the impact of extension and agricultural research in researching rural and diverse communities in the U.S. and internationally?
Well, certainly rural communities have their own set of challenges, sometimes quite unique from an urban community. We look at issues related to poverty in some areas of the country, and certainly issues of obesity. So I think we have to remember that the rural audiences that we serve in some of our more rural states with our land-grant universities, there are some very unique circumstances. But what we know from our great history associated with the land-grant universities, that we've built wonderful partnerships across states and across the nation to serve these communities in a very effective and efficient way. Those partnerships have been developed through our extension services, through the experiment stations, and they really have delivered in an enormous capacity. They've also dealt with the opportunity of having an investment at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level, making it quite a unique program when we think about especially extension, that 3 levels of funding. And one of the best stories I think we could talk about in the success of serving rural populations really relates back to how we have worked with historically what have been the home economic clubs. So I grew up in an extension family. My mother in Kansas was part of the K-State Home Ec Club, and she would go on a regular basis to the meetings to learn about research-based information related to nutrition and to food safety. She would come home with this newly found information, and oftentimes I was the victim of that because I had more duties as a result of what she learned at these important educational sessions brought to her by the Kansas State Research and Extension Network. But what it points out was that it was really just the beginning. And where we are today, after 50 years of success with the expanded food nutrition program, we've seen a tremendous impact that has occurred across this nation in serving, both in rural and urban audiences, programs related to nutrition and food safety that have made a tremendous difference. You know the data, but just to remind you that for every dollar invested in this important extension program that is research-based, there is a return of $9.52. And that return is shown in reduced health costs, it's shown in reduced absenteeism from the workplace, and it's shown in the ability for individuals to realize and learn that they can have a healthier diet that truly influences and makes a difference for their family. So this is really one of the landmark successes, I believe, of the land-grant university system, what we were able to do and continue to do with FNEP programming. And then when we think about taking what we do in this great country and how we deliver it internationally, we see that nutrition is also the issue internationally as well. At Iowa State University, we have the Center for Sustainable Rural Livelihoods, and one of the key successes has been around helping farmers be able to produce enough food for their family, teaching mothers about the importance of that first 1,000 days of the life of their children, having nutrition feeding centers available so that truly these babies have an opportunity to receive the nutrition that they need so that they can go on and be a contributing member of that family and of their community. So we see these nice parallels between what we've done in the United States on nutrition through extension and research and what we can do internationally as well. If you don't have an adequate diet, if you are hungry, as President Myers says, then that's where conflict arises, and that's where opportunity is truly lost. So those are 2 great examples of what we're able to do both in the United States and globally. And then I would add to this idea of partnerships, which is what all of these programs have been about, is the most recently announced National Institute for Antimicrobial Resistance Research and Education, an effort that is being led by Iowa State University in partnership with the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and several other partners, but to advance through education and research programs that will make a difference in how we manage this great tool we have in the antibiotics that are available to us. And just this summer, the Institute convened a whole set of individuals to come together and further refine what are the next steps that have to occur to advance that important issue for the benefit of farmers, for the benefit of every single one of us who at any given moment might need to have an antibiotic to help us with a health issue that we're facing. So that institute that came about because of APLU, again, Peter McGrath's great leadership, the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges together lifted that issue up and said that we should work on that together. So again, partnerships, collaborations, This is how we move forward. And in the rural America that makes up so much of what happens in this great country, collaboration is a critical need, and it's the way that we can address the challenges and really allow individuals to see and build on new opportunities.
Thank you, Wendy. Tim, yes. So Tim, you lead a large public university system.
You think?
I think. And I want you to tell us about the role of public universities in student social and economic mobility, including access and competition for completion for minority, low-income, and first-generation students.
Well, thank you, Gary, and good evening, everyone. You know, the California State University is an interesting university. It's comprised of 23 universities from San Diego State here in the south all the way up to Humboldt State in Arcata. So I view it as an 800-mile long, 500-mile wide university with over 482,000 students and about 54,000 employees. So when you screw something up, you do it on a big time scale. But if you get it right, you can affect hundreds of thousands of students. We have well over half of our students are students from underserved communities, students of color. Well over a third are first in their family to venture beyond middle school or high school to a university. And on top of that, there's about another 25% who, when they complete, will be the first in their families to complete a college degree. And about 44% of our students receive Pell Grants, letting you know where they are on the economic income level of their families. We produce in California 50% of the baccalaureate degrees in any given year. And there's about almost 3.8 million living CSU alums who live in California. And if you have a job in California, the world's 5th largest economy, 1 in 10 are a Cal State graduate. So it gives you a sense of the scale when you start putting a face on top of who we are. When I arrived in 2012, it was interesting to hear the mantra that it was all about access, affordability, and quality. And I was scratching my head about that next word about getting out, the notion of completion. And so from that, we launched a graduation initiative, and it's had several refinements. But we have been relentlessly focused on having our students achieve their degrees sooner than they otherwise might have. And just in the last 4 years, let me crow a little bit about the data. Our 4-year rates have moved from 19% in 2015 to 28% in 2019. That's a pretty big jump in 4 years. And those who earn their degree in 6 years or less has gone from 57 to 62%. About half our students are transfers from the community colleges, and that number has gone, those who finish within 2 years of transferring has gone from 30 to 40%, and those who finish within 4 years of transferring has gone from 73 to 78. And within that, at the 4-year rate, our underrepresented, underserved communities of color have actually increased more than many other of our communities. The underserved community has gone up 8% in the 4-year graduation rate just in 4 years. So we only give baccalaureate degrees, Master of Science degrees, and applied doctoral degrees like Doctor of Physical Therapy, Audiology, et cetera. And we do have some joint PhD programs with the University of California campuses, San Diego, et cetera. So what I thought about was, and we've all seen this paradigm of what is equity, and for many years it's been just getting in. But the truth of the matter is it's not only getting out, but it's what you do once you get out. And that gets to the issue of social mobility. We've all seen this cartoon of 3 kids standing outside a fence watching a ball game, a tall one, a middle-sized one, and a short one. The tall one can barely see the top of the fence. The next one can't see, and the short guy's out of luck. So then the next part of this cartoon is put equal-sized boxes underneath these 3 kids, and now the tall guy can see really well, The middle-sized one is right at the fence line, and that short kid still can't see over. And people lament, well, that's just not fair. So then equity is putting different sized boxes underneath these kids so everybody can see over the fence. That's ridiculous. That's not equity. What is equity is when those 3 kids jump over the fence and get out on that field of play, that field of life, and compete and can prosper and can succeed. And that's the real issue here, is changing the paradigm from getting in to getting in and getting out to getting out and doing something with it. And I think that's sort of a cultural shift for us at the Cal State University, and one we're making progress on. Many of our campuses have been engaged in Raj Chetty's study and his co-workers about looking at social mobility, where they've looked at the income levels of students' families when they come in, and looked at that student's income 10 years later and using federal data, so we can't game the system with our own data. Whether you look at those who move from the lowest quartile to the upper quartile, or whether you look at those who succeed come in the lowest quintile, 20%, and 10 years later in the upper quintile, the Cal State University campuses across the board are all in the top tier of those outcomes. And the Los Angeles campus actually has been #1 in the nation with respect to that mobility. And Sacramento State and Northridge and San Diego, everybody has been moving the needle on social mobility. And I think that's a really important piece that our faculty have finally engaged in, that it's not only about the education for all the reasons my colleagues have spoken to and the research, but it's also preparing them to be competitive in the California economy of tomorrow. And without that career, you don't get social mobility by having a piece of parchment paper. Right. You get social mobility by using the skills and experiences and the sacrifices that allowed you to earn that, and then going on and doing something that actually helps move your family, yourself, and your community to a higher level. And with that, then all of the things that have been said will happen. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Tim. Certainly compelling comments. I too have had my issues with that fence and box equity analogy. I think I always thought they should just move the fence out of the way, right. Not have a fence. Now, one of the reasons I was a popular professor is I always ended my classes on time or early. So I'm going to ask if the audience would thank our panelists one more time for their comments. And let me just express, on behalf of everyone, our gratitude to the veterans once again for their service to the country. Thank you. Have a nice evening.